Well, for me, it's a big pleasure to be sharing my music with the New Yorkers composers. In first place, I want to excuse me for my broken English. I am Mexican, and I don't used to speak English normally. I am very, very pleased because I came for 1 year to New York City, and I find these composers now that involves all the composers of the city. For me, it's really an exciting thing to have the opportunities to share my music with the composers that live in this place, or special place that is New York City. I think when one imagines a piece, it's already there. I cannot imagine something that I cannot do. Because if I have the piece in my imagination, that means that the piece already exists. So I think the problem is to have interesting thoughts. But I think because in the moment we imagine a piece, it's because it's already there. The only thing is just to give the step to write it. No, I think the process of composition is to have the courage to write what we think, what we have in mind. I think all the people in the world have fantasies. The important thing is to make that step, to take it to the reality. Sometimes one thing that is more difficult than the reality. I would advise the young composers not to be afraid of anything. Not to be afraid of the big orchestra, for example. Sometimes we are afraid to have in front of us 100 musicians, as is the symphonic orchestra. I think we don't have to be afraid. We have to think that the only thing we lose when we fail is paper. Well, this piece didn't work, to the garbage. But don't to be afraid. I never studied officially instrumentation, for example, orchestration. I studied by myself, and I decided someday to just write for big orchestra. I have a lot of pieces for orchestra, and of course the great masters like Beethoven, Mozart, Mahler were my big teachers, of course, studying the scores of other composers. But the important thing is not to be afraid of our imagination. What we have to do is to have the courage to do it, to write it down. I don't think we are different because of the place where we live, because now the communication is maybe before, but with the great quantity of communication that we have with the world now, we have all the influences of the different composers of the world. I can hear in Mexico Brian Ferneyhough, Ligeti, Lageman, all these new names, famous names. And of course, all this music have an influence all over the world, because the famous people are always surrounding the composers in this case. So I think to be Latin American doesn't say anything about that. maybe the character, of course, we are different from a Norwegian or a French, because our character is maybe more open, or we are different, of course, but the influences are so big in the world that we cannot say that there is a Mexican classical music or a Cuban it's impossible to know. There are composers, of course, that have certain color of their countries because they look for that. But it's not my case. Maybe sometimes when I wrote, for example, the Cantata del Tequila, of course, I put some Mexican color on the piece. I want trumpets like the mariachi or something like that. But it was thought for that, no? But in general, I'm not thinking in Mexican music or Latin American music when I write. I think in textures, and I have a lot of influences for many, all the things I hear